Truth-telling. This is essentially what journalism is all about. Is it raining outside? You look out the window to find out if this is true. Not by asking two people if they think it's raining or not. Truth is what you can see. Truth is what the evidence supports. But in this age of social media, is it really that simple? I am a Marcos era baby. I was born just as martial rule ended in 1981, 2 years before the assassination of Ninoy Aquino. I was 4 going 5 during the 1986 EDSA revolution. But the images of a mass uprising were and are still clear in my head. This period in our history is well documented. The jewelry, artwork, and legendary shoe collection of Imelda Marcos, the properties in New York, the offshore accounts, all exposed and proven by court decisions. But at some point in the last 30 years, especially the last 10 years, there is another truth that has emerged. Yes, truth is the word they use. And they've cast doubt on the established history of the Marcos years. On Facebook, YouTube, and TikTok, we are bombarded with narratives of how Marcos led the Philippines to its golden years. Golden years of economic prosperity, golden years of infrastructure, and so on. Did they steal billions from the national coffers? Oh, they didn't have to, the narrative goes. Marcos was paid gold bars when he was a lawyer by a family that used to own the Philippines. There's also the argument that the Marcoses were never jailed. So how could they have stolen? These weren't fed to Filipino social media users yesterday. The disinformation campaign to benefit the Marcoses started years ago, unchecked and unchallenged. And what happens when lies are told 1,000 times? They become truth to some people. Now we have a Marcos who's a front runner in the 2022 presidential election. Truth didn't used to be so easily manipulated. Those of you from Gen Z probably don't remember a time when there was no social media. But that wasn't too long ago. Sure, there was Friendster and MySpace, but all we were doing with them really was collecting testimonials from friends. As a journalist, I couldn't use them to find out what politicians were doing, what projects they were engaged in, and if their constituents had any complaints. I had to call so many different offices of the local government, the Department of Public Works and Highways, and the Commission on Audit to be able to get the finances related to the road project. Another story, the untold story of Emilio Aguinaldo, had me literally going around the city looking for a photo. I don't remember whose photo, but I ended up finding it 1 hour before airing. And it was just a 1-by-1 picture, but we had to make do with it. Of course, all this chasing around could still happen today, but there are infinitely more things you can find online now. In those days, it took a lot more work to do journalism, but we did it because we took our job seriously. It was clear to us what our role was in society. We were the fourth state, holding power to account, keeping democracy in check, and gatekeeping the truth. These days, anyone can dip their hands in journalism, or certain elements or aspects of journalism. These days, you can track down or stalk people on Facebook and Instagram. You can have books delivered to you, or ebooks downloaded. I will admit some of you are quicker and better at finding old footage, old sound bites, articles, and legal documents. And so I'd say the internet has democratized journalism to an extent, and well, in some respects, this is good. Now we can all be information disseminators. And this is good, for example, for when there are ongoing disasters and people need immediate help. Now we can all make officials accountable for their actions by, say, putting together available facts. Now, with just a cell phone, anyone can assemble videos and interview people. All these used to be the exclusive domain of journalists. We don't have to go very far to see how journalism has evolved in the age of social media. Here in the Philippines, ABS-CBN and GMA were early proponents of citizen journalism. They had ordinary citizens reporting on their platforms, primarily their primetime newscasts. And this wasn't too long ago. It was just about 10 years ago. A lot of the citizen journalists were untrained in journalism, of course, but because they submit to news organizations, their works get vetted and polished, much like what our reports go through. They go through several layers of editing and approval. So because news agencies were able to regulate these contributed materials, it looked like citizen journalism was working. No one in the news industry could have anticipated how Facebook and YouTube and now TikTok were going to change the landscape. It turns out the citizen journalism news organizations had envisioned and even promoted in the early days of social media isn't the benign creature it promised to be. Suddenly, people could hide under the veil of anonymity and say whatever they want. Suddenly, people were piecing together information on their own. Suddenly, they were writing on microblogs and producing their own video clips. Suddenly, journalists no longer had the monopoly on news and information and were no longer the gatekeepers. The industry wanted more participation from its audience, but we didn't think social media would blow the door wide open, too wide open. And I'm not saying we are gods who are perfect and whose credibility can never be questioned. We are humans, so we can still make mistakes. But we are trained to sift through interviews and information. We have editors who fact-check and spot blatant biases and possible partisanship. We have internal mechanisms for holding us responsible for errors. But when those of you who are active online put out something on your own social media accounts, no one's telling you, no, let me see that first. On Viber group chats, for instance, there is so much going around that discredits vaccines. Some totally baseless, some bordering on ridiculous, as in they'll turn us into zombies. Yet people pass them around. Ivermectin, a drug for animals, is being promoted as treatment for COVID. And again, without solid studies backing this claim, they're still widely circulated. Now, those who are forwarding them may be considered victims of misinformation and disinformation as well. But what about those who deliberately twist and spin information to advance their agenda? Fake news that's related to the pandemic starts somewhere, and it could be from anti-vaxxers and pandemic deniers. The historical revisionism that aims to rehabilitate the Marcoses appears to be well-funded and well-coordinated. The attacks online against certain personalities, like Vice President Leni Robredo, Maria Ressa, and other journalists, you can observe how trolls have templates that they use or base their attacks on. I've been the subject of these attacks as well. My worst experience was when someone threatened to cut my head off after I had tweeted something about the ABS-CBN shutdown in 2020. This person turned out to be real, and I considered getting the NBI's help, which I actually started doing, but I withdrew the request when the person's mother apologized. This person wasn't a troll and wasn't spreading lies about me, but his threat highlights how vicious the online environment has become and how this could have a chilling effect on truth-telling. All these have been enabled by tech companies for years. We do see them trying to rein in misinformation and disinformation now by working with independent fact-checkers and having more open mechanisms for reporting fake news and hate speech. But these have not been enough. And if Facebook whistleblower Frances Haugen is to be taken for her word, it's because algorithm that makes users see what they want to see works to the advantage of Facebook's money-making aim. So I don't know if we can ever go back to the time when facts go through a system of checks and balances. What are we supposed to do? And by we, I don't just mean us in the truth-telling industry, so to speak. By we, I mean us. All of us whose only agenda is the truth, meaning not to make a political opponent look bad, not to sell or discredit a certain product, not to push forward a certain ideology, but simply what's happening outside the window, as I explained in the beginning. Because when truth is the casualty, it's not just professional journalists who are victims. It's all of us, and democracy itself. If a tyrant wins an election because we let disinformation spread, for example, everyone suffers. But because we journalists are trained to seek the truth, we must lead the way. We can't and shouldn't be the first to become mere stenographers. When an outright lie is said on live TV, we need to call it out immediately and provide context. The message we're sending here is that it's not okay to lie, and that we can all stop these lies from spreading by immediately providing context and facts. Journalists have stock knowledge that gives them the advantage of being able to counter lies instantly. But any of you truth advocates online have the power to do this too. Remember though that it's not a game of who can tweet or post first. Our goal is to dismantle lies, so we shouldn't let doubters have any opportunity to question our facts. The name of the game is accuracy. And when it comes to accuracy, the rule of thumb is a 2-step verification, 3-step even if possible. A direct source would be ideal, say a quote from the subject of the story, or an official document, or both. You can then support these by searching for old social media posts or news articles. But wait, how do you sift through the countless sources on the internet? On social media, you can usually search for the history of conversations or posts and use screenshots as evidence if a post or series of posts are being questioned. You can read blogs and microblogs and watch YouTube and Facebook videos, but you should always double check what's written or being said against legitimate news articles, academic papers, and government websites. Once you can expertly identify what's fake and what's not, you can help stop the spread of disinformation and misinformation. And while we journalists may have a wider reach, there seems to be quite a significant segment of society now that doesn't read the news anymore and would only get bits and pieces of information from headlines and from what they see friends and family posting. So when you see fake news going around, try posting the counter-truth. A friend or two may see your post, and it could mean 1 or 2 people getting saved from the scourge of fake news. If you're comfortable talking to people face-to-face about the disinformation that they are spreading around, go ahead, please do so. Now, the one thing that we in the press have failed miserably, I think, is keeping up with technology and social media trends. Propagandists were on YouTube before we were. They were using Facebook more diversely and creatively than we were. And they are massively on TikTok when we're just starting to make our presence felt in the app. In other words, they were reaching an audience we were missing. Now we're having to play catch up, but better late than never. I will admit, I personally am still uncomfortable doing TikTok, so I have to convince myself too. But I firmly believe reporters have to be on TikTok and going forward on new apps that come up. And because there's no turning back now from our truth-telling partnership, you should try to get on these new apps too, so we can grow our audience of truth seekers. Having said that, at the end of the day, it's not the platform per se that will beat propaganda and disinformation. The presentation will attract the audience, but it's the evidence that supports our claims of truth that can ultimately debunk falsehoods that people have come to believe. The current generation of online users, together with us in the professional world of journalism, can reclaim the integrity of the internet. Instead of letting hate and lies spread, they can use social media to call for accountability and ensure that users know how to tell fact from fiction.